I've had the great pleasure of working with Nadine Keane, and I can truly say, hand on heart, this lady's a game changer. So please help me welcome Nadine to the stage as she talks through navigating the analytics practitioner to analytics manager career path.
Thank you very much, Roisin. That was a very, very nice, I think, overestimation of me, but a very nice introduction. So it's great to be here. There's even some music. I'm Irish, maybe we can have a sing-song. So it's really great to be here. As Roisin said, I'm going to speak about navigating the analytics practitioner to analytics manager career path. Really, these are, two different points in your career. For some people here, it might be completely relevant. For some people here, you might be well past this. But hopefully, you can learn something from some of my own experience. Some of this is going to come from my own experience. Some of it's going to come from a framework, an industry best practice framework, which I'll also introduce. So, to get going, I'm going to start with New Year's Eve last year, actually, and you will see a little bit more about that. Just have in your mind what you think about when you think of New Year's Eve. That's all I'll say for the moment. I'll talk very briefly about successful careers in data and some advice that has helped me. At the time, I hadn't had the pleasure of having attended one of Sarah Hodgkin's talks. Had I had the pleasure, I probably would be referencing Sarah here. I'll speak a little bit about that framework I mentioned, which is the Institute for Operations Research and the Management Sciences Analytics Professional Certification Framework. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I think you can learn something from it. I'll share some tips, my own personal tips for data professionals, focusing in on the different tips depending on whether you are an individual contributor, so a data practitioner, an analyst, or whether you are a manager. And when I speak about managers while I'm talking about potentially people managers, so you might be managing other people, you might have a team that you manage, or you might have teams of teams, but also you could be a program manager and not have direct reports, but you're still potentially responsible for driving results through other people. Very finally, I'll talk about keeping skill sets current. It's something that has always been a challenge and times a struggle for me personally, working in the data profession. Tools, technologies change. Fundamentals maybe don't, mathematics is mathematics, statistics are statistics, but you can always learn new approaches. There's advances in machine learning and so on. So there are always advances even in the mathematics, but how to keep that current can be a challenge. Questions at the end, obviously. New Year's Eve. Okay, so do you have that image in your mind of what New Year's Eve feels like? Probably something like on the left where it's, fireworks and champagnes, maybe not so much what's on the right, which is me in my very attractive pink polka dot fluffy dressing gown. Now, you might ask, why am I showing this? And it's not X Factor, so it wasn't because my granny died or whatever. It's because I was doing a course at the time. And this course was through Coursera, an online course. And for some reason, some sadistic reason, I think, they made you, when you submitted assignments, do facial recognition, that it was really you submitting the assignments so you could get accreditation and certified. And every time I submitted these assignments, I looked like this. It was like midnight on a Saturday or a Sunday night. I was racing against the clock to get it in on time. I was sitting on my bed frantically typing on my laptop, always in this pink polka dot dressing gown for some reason. So I had these images of me captured on the screen with no makeup and not looking my best, even on New Year's Eve last year. So, part of the reason why I'm showing you this maybe is a slight ploy that after seeing me looking at my worst like this, anything that happens over the next 30 minutes, anything I say or do, can't be as embarrassing as this. But I'll get back to this actually. So this was me, not this, unfortunately. All right, a successful data career. So back to what I mentioned, could have really been shared by Sarah Hodgkin's workshop earlier, which I had the good fortune to attend. I read this article in 2013 in the Harvard Business Review by Monica Velour, and it was titled Craft a Sustainable Career. And some of the tips that I took from that has helped me since then, and I think can be applied at any stage of your career. So number one, actively practice career crafting. Back to what Sarah was saying in the workshop, be a career activist. You drive your career and it's your responsibility. Know how you add value. Again, this reflects something that Sarah was saying. Sarah talked about how you distinguish yourself or what distinguishes you. For me, at a sort of midpoint in my career, I was very fortunate to work with an amazing director of my department at the time, who constantly asked, what value does this add? What value do you add even? You need to know that. What value does this project that you're working on add? What value will this meeting add? What value will this add for you in your career? And what value do you add in your role or even in your organization or even just in this moment, on this day? If you reflect on that regularly, it really can help you to distinguish yourself by being aware of what are those traits in you, those skill sets, those competencies that you can say truly are distinguishable about you and distinguish you from others. Then you know what your value add is. You should link accomplishments to career goals. So if you have, some goals in mind, small, very small accomplishments along the way, congratulate yourselves for them. It could be just hosting a meeting that you were worried was going to be difficult, or doing a presentation. For me, this is going to be an accomplishment, standing here today. One of my, things that I'm not very good at is networking. And yet, here I am today, not just networking, not just attending, but also speaking. And it means a lot to me that I've been able to do this. Staying up to date with professional and industry developments. Hopefully that's what we're doing here today. And we're a room full of ambitious people. Hopefully it's what we do on a regular basis. But it does take a bit of investment of time. Seeking opportunities to work or network with inspiring people. Definitely we're doing that today. Okay, sorry, if you can't hear me, I've just been advised to hold this up higher. All right. Personal experiences. So just to give you a bit of an idea, there's a lot of detail here. Really all this says is during my own career, which at times I have been crafting, at times I have been going along with, I've had a mixture of academic or course-based learning. So, at university, I learned the foundations of data and analytics, statistics, quantitative modeling, computer science, and business, and so on. And that's always stood me in really good ground in a career in analytics. I spent the early part of my career working in marketing analytics, market research. I developed propensity models, and all of that again stood me in really good stead. I went back to academia again to learn more. So I felt I didn't have good enough business knowledge. The people around me seemed to know more, and I wanted to know what they knew. And at the time, I probably mistook experience for knowledge. I went back to college, probably what I needed was just to gain more experience. Anyway, I did learn a lot. It was good at the time, and I kept up my interest and my active participation in analytics and data by lecturing in statistics, because I didn't want to lose touch with what I felt was what I really loved. Okay, back to work. I gained, this is probably, in four bullet points here, a decade of work. But I worked in managing customer experience programs, being responsible for customer analytics, reporting and BI. And along the way, I gained a lot of these skill sets and competencies, and worked with a lot of the tools that you see here, all of the tools that you see here over my career. I've had the good fortune to work with. And anybody who's been in the data and analytics field for pre the dot-com bubble bursting, you'll recognize there's a progression of tools along here. That's going to happen. If you're working in a data field, there's always going to be tools and technologies that are changing, and that's, you can skip some, but at some point you might have to progress. Or you might progress to a new tool or technology because you move company and they use something different. So that's always going to happen. Okay, back to academic learning. So a couple of years ago, around the time, probably 2013, when I was reading that article, I felt that I had been moving away from my hands-on practice in analytics and data. And, I'd moved into management roles. In fact, in my early part of my career, I moved sort of in and out of individual contributor and manager roles quite a bit. I really had to reflect and say, okay, is this what I want? I do love managing teams. I love, working with people through their own professional development, but I don't want that to be at the expense of mine. And I, hand on heart, wasn't ready to give up hands-on working in analytics. I was worried that my skill set had gotten rusty. Had gotten a bit out of date. So I did a bit of research and I decided to take a data science specialization from Coursera, the one that I mentioned that made me take all those ugly photos of myself every week when I was submitting assignments. It's a 2-year specialization, there's 9 modules and a capstone project at the end. I also completed became certified as an analytics professional through the Institute of Operations Research in the Management Sciences. And it's that I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about now. So, the Certified Analytics Professional credential is awarded by the Institute for Operations Research in the Management Sciences. Short is INFORMS and short for the credential is CAP. And this is based in the US, but it's internationally recognized. It's been around for about 3 years now. This year was the first year you could take the examination that you need to take online outside of the US, so I took it at the start of this year. And I'll explain a little bit about it. There is an extensively experienced certification board. So the people who have designed this certification are really heavy hitters within the analytics profession. So there are people who you may or may not have heard of, but to me they are some household names. There's Polly Mitchell-Guthrie, who's a senior leader in SaaS. For example, Bill Franks, who's the Chief Analytics Officer from Teradata, is on the certification board. There's Jack Livis from UPS and a lot of other analytics household names. So it's quite well respected and I would say is going to become more and more prevalent. If you are interested in becoming certified, I think it can only do your career really good. If you are a hiring manager and you see it, I think you can recognize it as something that is a good achievement. And in the UK, the Operations Research Society is in discussion with INFORMS at the moment on a partnership around the CAP certification. So I think it's going to become more and more prevalent in the UK also over the next few years. So you should start hearing about it more and more. To take the certification, you have to meet academic and experience thresholds. So for example, you have to have an undergraduate degree in an analytics related field and 5 years experience, or you can have a master's and 3 years experience, or you can have a degree in an unrelated field but 7 years experience. So, there is quite an academic and experience threshold to meet. If you don't meet these thresholds, you can take certification on, it's called an associate CAP. So you might have the academic background, but you don't yet have the years of experience, and then you can go for the associate CAP. The exam that you take is fair, valid and reliable. Anybody who works in statistics know that these are words that are dear to our hearts, valid and reliable, and you can imagine from the type of people who have designed this that this is upheld very rigorously. It demonstrates commitment to ethics in the profession, so you need to sign a code of ethics, much like you might do if you were a project manager and you were getting PMP certified. the certification needs renewal through lifelong learning. So for you, if you want to go for the certification, or as a hiring manager, if you see somebody with this certification, you know that they're very committed to their own career, because to keep the certification active and valid, you need to gain professional development units over 3 years and show that you have developed yourself within analytics during that time, and then your certification will be renewed. CAP is based on domains of knowledge within analytics, which are all based around managing an analytics solution, or what you might hear called a data product, from end to end. So the steps involved in delivering an analytics solution are broken down into 7 areas of knowledge, or domains of knowledge. So there's the business problem framing step, there's the analytics problem framing step, there's the data work, obviously, there's the methodology selection, model building, deployment of the solution, and then model lifecycle management. So what I'll go through now, if you're not familiar with all these steps, or you haven't consciously known that these steps have been outlined by somebody like this institute, but you've been working in data analytics and creating data solutions or providing analytics solutions, you've probably been following these steps, just unconsciously, because these are the steps that you take. It's great today that some of the workshops have been covering these steps very explicitly, like getting a great data brief is really important at the first 2 steps. Working with data and modelling is actually on at the moment in the workshop that Kate has on in R. So throughout the day, I've been seeing all these steps discussed. I don't think there's one that we haven't really touched on, maybe just the last. Okay, so what I'm going to go through, I don't know if you can see it very well, very briefly, I'm going to touch on each of these steps quite briefly. This is very glib of me, because there's a lot more detail to this, and this doesn't mean that knowing these steps means you can do it well. Doing it well means that you've taken on the advice, for example, of Georgina earlier today when she explained how actually to do this and get this done in a way that it's accepted by a business. But let's just put that aside for the moment and say, yeah, you know how to do that. You know how to get the business to take on board what it is that you're developing. And let's just talk about the tasks that you would do. So the business problem framing, if you're an individual contributor, you'll be concerning yourself with, who are the stakeholders? Who's asking me for what? I need to meet with them. I need to understand what they want. And I need to understand, what's the scope of the project, what are the business benefits that are expected from this analytics project. As a manager, you're concerned maybe about slightly different things, because you're thinking about, okay, is my team member following a quality process to get this done? Sorry. You're probably challenging your team member to say, okay, have you done this? Have you spoken to this person? They're going to be very important. If you don't speak to them, this will never get through, and so on and so forth. But also backing up your team member. So as an analytics manager, you need to be both a challenger and a supporter. So you also need to support your team member when those questions come. Has your team done this in the right way? Yes, they have, because my team member has met with all the right people, has asked all the right questions, gathered all the right information, and so on. So you'll see this theme running through each of these steps. As an individual contributor, as an analytics professional yourself, or as a data practitioner, you're responsible for the skills and knowledge that you bring to a project or a solution. As a manager, you're responsible for the people and the processes around delivering those solutions. And there's some of the differences in the 2 roles. And not everybody likes the people and process. A lot of people like being an individual contributor and like having control of the project that they're working on. As a manager, you lose a bit of that control, but you do gain other really good things, like being able to have a lot of influence on how processes are designed that your team will work through, and on the professional development of the people within your team. So the analytics problem framing, again, the individual contributor is going to work on reformulating the problem analytically. So what are the inputs and outputs? What are the types of data that I need? And the manager is going to make sure that all this is done in the right way, and so on. At the data step, the individual contributor is collecting data. is cleaning data, is analysing data, is doing all the stuff that we love about data, or sometimes hate. But the manager is making sure that there's good data governance, not just for this project or this solution, but all the time. So is there good data governance within the organisation that you work in? And that goes beyond just you and your team. There's usually IT involved, or other departments. The operations departments who create the data or who consume the data. How are they creating it? How are they consuming it? And so on. There's also reviewing the quality of the data work that your team member has done is important as a manager. In terms of methodology and model building, I'll cover these at the same time. These are, really about applying your knowledge and skills. So what is the right way to tackle this problem? Is it segmentation? Do I require a dashboard at the end of this? How am I going to calculate all the KPIs that we need? How am I going to build this predictive model that we need to use? And so on. At this time, the manager is really responsible for making sure that you can do that you have the right tools, that you have the right time frames to allow you to do this, that there are good deadlines that are good for the business but also good for you. In terms of deployment, this can be done in a number of ways depending on what the solution is. So in terms of data solutions, there are models that are built and put into production systems. So that can control transactional intelligence of your business. There are models that are really just used for strategic decision making, that you just run, get the answer, give it to whoever needs to know what to do next, and they will take that decision and run with it. And then there are other data product solutions like dashboards, like visualizations, like reports, and so on. So really, deployment could be any of those things. As a manager, you're going to make sure that the deployment process is agreed within the company, that you have a good process up and running with your stakeholders that are really your internal customers, and that there are good service level agreements or deadlines and so on set in place. Something that here you'll notice the numbers across the right. The Institute has done a lot of research into, for an end-to-end analytics solution delivery, how much time is usually spent on each of these steps. At the bottom here you see model lifecycle management. Maybe 4 to 8% of the time is spent on this. Sometimes it's even forgotten, but it should never be forgotten. Any data solution that you deliver, any report, any dashboard, any calculations, any model that you build has a shelf life, and it starts from the day that you create it, because it's always based on some historical data. Even if it's a prediction, it's still based on historical data. It's based on your business, your customer base, your processes, at a point in time, and you need to recognize that, and it will degrade over time. So your business adds a new product, your customer base can change, so then your model won't reflect what you had intended at the time that you created it. All those sorts of things mean that model lifecycle management is really important when you create a data product. So this shouldn't be forgotten, but it should also be handed over in part to your stakeholders, to your internal customers. You need to train them on what it is you've created, so they know what it should do and know how to use it, or know what the output should be. And if they notice it going out of sync, then they can come to you and say, okay, I see something weird going on here. Is it supposed to do that? And maybe some reanalysis might be needed. For an individual contributor, I'm going to share some top tips on what I've learned through experience, through mistakes, and hopefully it will help some of you. Number one, building trust is critical. This was mentioned throughout the day. If you don't have trust of your partners, your stakeholders, your internal customers, whoever it is you work for, really, when it comes to analytics, you're always working for somebody. At the end of the day, hopefully it's for your end customers through your internal customers often. You need to have trust, because they need to trust you when you tell them something that you see in the data, that you see through analysis. And all the good advice that we've heard earlier today is really how you can do that. If you don't have trust, you need to build it as fast as you can. And if you're trying to do that, then you're going to have to work harder on your analysis. You're going to have ironclad analysis. You're going to have, the simplest explanations to make it easy for the people who don't know you to take on board what it is you're trying to share. And you need to show results fast. Another tip I would share, and this goes back to, again, something that Celia mentioned, we like things to be perfect as analytics professionals. We like perfection and we like things to work out well. Some really good advice that I got early in my career when it comes to tracking or creating KPIs or operational metrics that are important to your business, they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to fully reflect every eventuality that you might be trying to reflect in them. But if they are directionally correct and you can track them trending over time and they're going up, that's good. That will tell you the actions you and your business are taking are having a positive effect. If they're going down, that'll tell you, okay, something needs to change. So forget the perfection, get something implemented and get some work done. Okay, when managing an analytics project, know which step you're in. So what I just went through each of those steps, don't get ahead of yourself. Make sure particularly that you've closed out the business problem framing. If you haven't got that brief really well defined, you're going to make some mistakes along the way because somebody has misunderstood something or somebody's misinterpreting something. If you're not 100% clear in your mind that you who's working on the project and your stakeholders who's asked you for the project, that you're not on the same page, then later when you deliver some analysis or you deliver some working model, it can go down the drain so fast and your head will spin, and simply it'll be down to misalignment, miscommunication. So again, back to what we were talking about earlier with Georgina's talk, that's really, really critical. And those steps help you to know, okay, do I feel like there's a red flag here? Have I really closed this step out? It's not to say that you can't get ahead of yourself. You can, of course, we live in the real world. Go ahead, start looking at the data before you finish defining the problem, because then you'll give yourself a head start, but don't do anything concrete and definitive and share your results before you know exactly what it is you're working on. Automate everything you can, but automate it after you've proved something with experiments. And if you don't have time to do a proper experiment, back to, we want perfection. So, your A/B testing isn't as fantastic as it can be. A quick and dirty manual process can do it too. If you get good results with a quick and dirty manual process, great, then automate it, but automate it at some point. Okay, keep tools and technique skills up to date, but don't jump on every new bandwagon. So something I mentioned a little bit earlier. If you try and keep up to date with every single new tool and technology out there in the data field, you'll never get any work done. You'll never get any success in your career. You'll just spend your time doing courses constantly. You have to strike a good balance, and you have to pick and choose your battles, really, in terms of where you want to spend your time to advance your career, to advance your skill set. Gain people management exposure, if that's the way you want to take your career, by managing projects, by managing programs, definitely. If you're managing a program, you're definitely managing people already. You might not be responsible for them as a direct line manager, but you are delivering results through people and you're spending a lot of time with them. Another great way to gain people management exposure is mentoring others. Mentor more junior people on your team, or mentor people in other departments who are interested in analytics. And that's a great way too, to get some people management experience. And finally, craft a sustainable career, or be a career activist. Okay, top tips for analytics managers. Building trust is critical. Again, this is so important. You won't get anywhere, you won't achieve anything without that trust. So I can't emphasize this enough. It's why it's number one on both of my top tip lists. Know what part of the business process you are and are not responsible for. So if you are an analytics manager, you're responsible for a team of analysts or data professionals or market researchers, you're potentially responsible for, producing analysis. You're responsible for how quickly you do that. You're responsible for the tools and techniques and methodologies you apply. And back to what Georgina said earlier, you are the subject matter experts in this. That is your responsibility. You can have people take that for granted, but you can't ever forget it, because that's your category 1 area of responsibility. You are not responsible for other things. So while you work with data, you need to know where your responsibility starts and ends. Are you responsible for the quality of the data that's produced by production systems? Maybe, but maybe not. And you need to know if you are or if you aren't. The lists that your models might provide that go into an email campaign for marketing, what part of that list are you responsible for? You might be fully 100% responsible, or if it's handed over to a production system, is the IT department responsible for? Make sure you know, because at some point in time something will go wrong, and you need to know, first of all, who's responsible for fixing it, but second of all, who hasn't done what they're supposed to do? Was it you or was it somebody else? When those lines are blurred, you need to clear them up. Analysts think differently. We've talked about that a bit today, and it's been so invigorating to be in a room of people where I feel, everybody here is just like me, it seems. It's not that often that it happens, but it feels great to be with a room of, people interested in data. And as we talked a bit about earlier in Celia's presentation, analysts do think differently, and Celia has shown that in a number of ways through her talk. And one thing that it's important for you to do as a manager is be very conscious of that and make it safe for your team to be respectfully contrarian, because you can get the contrarian where it's really unhelpful, where you have somebody walk into a room and say, I have the data, you're an idiot, change everything you do. As we heard earlier, that's not what you want. You want to be able to promote that in a healthy way. You want to be able to promote that in the right way, with the right type of communication, with the right type of trust built, and then change everything that's been done in the business, if that's the right thing to do. You need to recognize that it takes, sometimes that was an extreme case where somebody felt like because they have the data, they have the right to say that they know everything under the sun. You also have the case where people have the data, they see that something is not the way it should be in the business processes, but it takes a lot of emotional courage to actually go and say, hey, I think we could be doing something different here. I have some analysis done that shows it might actually be better if we contact customers in the morning rather than the afternoon. And the contact center manager will say, oh my God, I have to change all my shift patterns. How do I hire people who want to work late into the evenings, and so on and so on and so on. But sometimes those conversations need to be had, and you need to help your team understand how to approach that in a way that it will be well received and you can open up that conversation. Keep analysts engaged with interesting projects or moonshots. Analysts by nature are very curious people. If you are an analytics manager, you are in a very privileged position because you are managing people who are usually very self-motivated, really want to do a great job, and you need to keep harnessing that, making sure that people like that don't get bored with tedious tasks and repetition, but can bring some innovation and bring some impact into their jobs. Focus on team and individual impacts and personal development is a good way to do that. Make sure you're constantly thinking of that, because if you're not recognizing it, everybody on your team or on your program team are thinking, what about me? What do I get out of this? That question's always there, always. Even if it doesn't seem so, everybody thinks like that. So you need to recognize that, you need to have those conversations, you need to make your team feel like you recognize what about me, and you're doing something, what about me, for each individual on your team. And if you have somebody who's not thinking, what about me, and this happens, if you have somebody who selflessly devotes every hour of every day thinking about what's the best thing we can do for our customers, what's the best thing we can do for our business, how can I work more, how can I drive more results, never thinking what about me, That's not a time to, open the champagne, sit back, keep handing over work and saying, yeah, I'll feed this, we'll get so much work done, this person is never going to stop. They will stop, definitely. They are going to hit a wall of disillusionment someday. So even for those people who you think have the ultimate self-motivation, they at some point still need to think, what about me? You can do 12 months of amazing work. You can kick all your deliverables out of the park. And then one day, lift your head up and go, wow, I did all that work, but what did I get out of it? Make sure you realize your team, if they're not already thinking that, they will think that at some stage. And you have to work on that with them. Questions are as important as answers. For me as an analyst, turning into an analytics manager at some point in my career, this became an aha moment for me at one point, where I realized, as an analyst, I brought the answers. I always had the answers, or if I didn't, I knew where to get them because I could get them from the data. But as an analytics manager, it's as important to know what are the questions. What is it that we're not looking at? What is it that we're not thinking about yet? What is it that the business is not thinking about yet? Or who has those great questions? Who are those contrarian thinkers within the business teams that we support, who I can go and talk to and say, what are you thinking? What are the things we should be looking for? What can I help you with? So the questions are as important as the answers. Set yourself aside challenges to keep your hands-on skills current. As a manager, this happened to me where you, as I mentioned earlier, you begin to feel like maybe your own skill set is getting rusty or out of date if you're not as hands-on as you used to be as an analyst or a data professional. You can still work on your work and you could do that. If you don't have the time, do something outside of work. If it's important to you, you'll find the time and you'll feel better for it. And this goes to the next point, craft a sustainable career. And again, I'm ending on the same point that I did for individual contributors, because that and trust, they don't change. It doesn't matter where you work, what role, what level, what title, what industry. Those are really important to both of those. So just to finish on my ways for keeping analytics skills current, there's lots of ways you can do it. And you can dip in and out of each of these. There are conferences and workshops like today where you can hear from others, learn from others. Courses and certifications, which can help you, feel a triumph. Yes, I've done this, I know more, or yes, I'm sure of what I know. You can give yourself those stretch assignments that I talked about. Networking, as I mentioned, networking was something that I shied away from. I try and do it more and more if possible. Industry journals, articles, blogs, professional social media are all really helpful. Just follow as many people as you can on Twitter or whatever, and you don't have to read everything that comes, but let that stream of information come and dip in and out of it as you need, and you'll see something new every so often and it'll be interesting. You can volunteer your time as a data professional with an organization like datakind.org, or you can go for hackathons, Kaggle competitions, or other competitions, for example, the Yelp Dataset Challenge. So, the Yelp Dataset Challenge is an annual challenge which the Yelp online review website hosts. They let out a portion of their dataset that you can work on and do some data analysis and submit a paper. The capstone project that I did for the Coursera specialization in data science that was administered through the Johns Hopkins University in Maryland, Baltimore, they set the challenge for the capstone as the Yelp Dataset Challenge. So to pass the certification, I needed to do this Yelp Dataset Challenge. And that is what I found myself doing at midnight last New Year's Eve, because I was right up against the wire and I was submitting right in the last minute. So even though, this doesn't look like the best picture of me, actually when I look at it, it makes me feel happy. This is a personal achievement for me. I made a sacrifice, and I think every success, the real learning about every success is that you always make some sacrifice to get it. So the measure of every success should be the sacrifice that you made to achieve it. My success was my time. My sacrifice was my time, And not only my time, it was my family's time. So I spent New Year's Eve not having a glass of champagne with my husband, not counting down the minutes or the seconds with my children, instead sitting like this, submitting. However, I was pleased, and those stretch assignments are good, and they made me feel like, yes, my skill set's still relevant. No matter what way I'm taking my career, I'm still a data practitioner. This was my paper. It was called Forecasting Yelp Review Volumes with a Hierarchical Time Series Approach. So not the most fun way to spend your New Year's Eve, but I did appreciate it, and I was glad that I did it. I was probably a bit glib when I said, this is the worst picture of me. It's maybe not, and it reminds me of other pictures which are worse. There are pictures of me on 3 different days. The 3 days where I gave birth to my 3 beautiful sons, and I look a lot worse than that. I'm paler, I'm tireder, and more weary probably, but again, they were personal triumphs. They were the days that I, was the most successful, the most productive, the happiest. And when we have our own personal successes, our own personal triumphs, they don't always come with makeup intact. But the benefit of being a woman is that when you have done some hard work, when you have put in long hours, and you have some personal triumph, you can add the makeup, you can add the sparkle, you can add the glamour, and that's always nice too. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadine. A fascinating presentation, and thank you for all those top tips. So I think we've just got time for one question, so I'm going to take it, unfortunately. But just tell us, you've talked a lot about tips that we should take for our teams and for ourselves in the organisation. What's on your agenda for the next 12 months in a top tip for yourself?
So my agenda for the next 12 months is always my top point. It's building trust. I'm actually moving from a role that I was in to a new role starting in January. So for me, it'll be building trust within that new organisation, with my new colleagues, and gaining some wins under my belt as fast as possible. And really, that'll be my focus.
Thank you so much, Nadine.